I knew something was off the second I opened the envelope. It was cream-colored, heavy paper, printed with a fake-looking logo that said Lakeview Homeowners Association, even though we didn't have an HOA. At least, not officially. I'd checked when I bought the house 3 years earlier. The previous HOA had dissolved after a lawsuit in the 90s. Still, there it was, an official-looking letter demanding I pay a noise violation fine of $175 for loud construction activities on a Sunday. I wasn't even home Sunday. My roofers were scheduled for Tuesday. The fine included a line that said, "Payable by check to Lakeview HOA, attention, Treasurer Karen B." I laughed. It wasn't even subtle. Karen B. The same woman who'd been glaring from across the cul-de-sac since I moved in. The same one who knocked on my door to tell me my trash bins were not regulation distance from the curb. The same one who told my girlfriend her car didn't belong in a neighborhood like this. She'd always acted like she ran Lakeview. Apparently, now she'd decided to resurrect the HOA by herself. My first instinct was to march over and confront her, but I'd learned early on that direct engagement with Karen was like wrestling a raccoon in a garbage can. You might win, but you'd still smell bad after. Instead, I called the county clerk's office and asked, just to confirm, whether there was any registered HOA entity for Lakeview Drive. The clerk laughed and said, "Oh, honey, that place hasn't had an HOA since 1994. Perfect. That meant this fine wasn't just annoying, it was fraud." I stared at the letter again. She'd gone through the trouble of printing it on nice paper, adding a watermark, even creating an account number. That level of effort meant she probably expected people to pay without question. Maybe she'd already collected from others. My neighbor 2 doors down, Mr. Jenkins, was nearly 80 and trusted anything written in Times New Roman. I decided to play dumb. I wrote a check for $175, made it out exactly as instructed, Lakeview HOA attention, Karen B., and slipped it in the return envelope. But I didn't send it from my mailbox. I drove to the next town over and mailed it from there. Then I called my bank and set up an automatic deposit notification. If that check ever hit a bank, I wanted the routing number. 3 days later, I got the alert. Check number 1028, cashed at First Federal Bank, deposited into an account ending in 3451. I grinned. Game on. I took a screenshot of the deposit confirmation and printed it out. Then I went to the police station, where Officer Raymond, who knew me from the time Karen tried to have my pickup truck towed for being commercial equipment, raised an eyebrow. "So she's running a fake HOA now," he said, sipping his coffee. "Apparently," I said, handing him the letter. "She's charging fake fines. And she just deposited one." He took a long look. "This is good. You've got the paper trail, her name on the pay-to line, and a cash check. That's wire fraud and impersonation of a legal entity." He paused, then smiled. "You want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far she's willing to go." That's when the fun began. The next week, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Karen posted, "Friendly reminder. HOA dues must be paid by Friday to avoid late fees." Half the neighborhood was confused. Some replied that there hadn't been an HOA in 30 years. Karen replied instantly, "It's been reactivated by majority vote. I'm the interim treasurer until the board forms." I nearly spit my coffee out. She wasn't even pretending anymore. I started getting messages privately. "Hey man, is this real? Did you pay?" I told everyone, "Ask for the registration number and see what she says." That night she sent another letter, now on Lakeview HOA letterhead, warning that defamation of board members was a finable offense. By now, I knew exactly what to do. I filed an anonymous tip to the State Department of Corporations, attaching her official letters as PDF. I also sent a copy to the local newspapers, Community Watch reporter, who loved small-town scandals. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, while mowing my lawn, I saw her walking toward me, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, mouth set in that pursed lip grimace that said I was about to lose brain cells. "Hello, Mr. Turner," she said in that faux pleasant tone. "I've come to inform you that your fence color is non-compliant with the Lakeview HOA aesthetic standards." I turned off the mower and wiped my forehead. "Karen, there's no HOA. "There is now," she said, handing me a form. "And as a founding member, you're obligated to comply. We've approved eggshell white, not bone white. You owe a $50 repainting fine." I looked at the form and smiled. "Sure," I said. "I'll mail it in." Her face lit up. She probably thought she'd found another easy mark. That evening, I wrote another check for $50, but this time, I printed "void if cashed equals consent to fraud prosecution" in the memo line. Then I mailed it the same way as before. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with another deposit notification. She'd cashed that one too. Now I had 2 instances. That made it a pattern, not a mistake. By the following week, the Lakeview HOA Facebook page appeared. It had 6 members. All neighbors Karen had probably cornered at their mailboxes. She posted daily updates like, "Reminder, trash bins must be hidden from view," and "Board meeting this Saturday at my house." I decided to attend. When I arrived, her living room looked like a suburban courtroom. She'd set up a folding table with a gavel, printed name tags, Treasurer Karen B., Vice Chair Linda H., and a cheap banner that said Lakeview HOA Board Meeting. I sat quietly in the back as she called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Our first order of business is unpaid fines. Several homeowners are delinquent, including Mr. Turner." She pointed at me dramatically. I raised my hand. "Karen, how exactly are you collecting these fines?" "Through our official HOA account," she said proudly. "All transactions are processed by me, as treasurer." That's when I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and dropped it on the table. "You mean this account?" Inside were the printed screenshots of her deposits, the letters, and a copy of my bank's fraud report. Her face drained of color. "Karen," I said calmly, "you cashed checks under a non-existent entity. That's fraud. But since I'm a nice neighbor, I haven't filed charges yet. You can refund the money and apologize, or we can let the county decide." The room went dead silent. Linda, her vice chair, looked like she wanted to melt into the carpet. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, there was a knock on the door. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. One was Officer Raymond. "Evening, folks," he said with a smile. "Karen B., we need to ask you some questions about a possible fraudulent organization." She froze, her eyes flicking between me and the envelope. I didn't say a word. I just folded my arms and watched the Queen of Lakeview finally realize her kingdom was made of paper. The news about Karen's arrest spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. By the next morning, half the neighborhood was standing at their driveways pretending to check mail while whispering updates. The other half was in the group chat debating whether they needed to resign from the fake HOA. But Karen herself wasn't actually arrested, just taken in for questioning and released a few hours later. I knew she wouldn't go down easily. Karen didn't believe she was wrong. She believed she was misunderstood. That night, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't the police this time. It was Karen's husband, Ron. I'd seen him before, the kind of man who looked perpetually tired from saying, "Yes, dear." He stood there holding a folder and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hey," he said, clearing his throat. "Karen asked me to bring you this. She wants to settle things quietly." I opened the folder. Inside was a typed agreement stating that the Lakeview HOA would be temporarily suspended pending clarification, and that I would cease defamation against board members. At the bottom, she'd scrawled her signature and attached a cashier's check for $225, repayment plus a $25 apology fee, whatever that meant. "She wants you to sign too," Ron said. I laughed. "Ron, tell her I'll cash the check, but I'm not signing a thing." He nodded like a man who'd just been handed a stay of execution. "Honestly, I don't blame you," he muttered, then turned and trudged home. The next morning, the Facebook page vanished. The banner on her lawn, "Proud HOA Treasurer," disappeared overnight. For a few blissful days, it seemed like the neighborhood might finally return to normal. Until, of course, the certified letter arrived. This one looked real. Embossed letterhead. Lawyer's address. Legal formatting. My stomach tightened as I read. "Cease and desist from harassing and defaming my client, Ms. Karen B., regarding the Lakeview HOA." It claimed I had intentionally entrapped her into cashing the checks and maliciously interfered with a community organization. I called the listed law office, expecting to hear a real receptionist. Instead, I got voicemail. A robotic voice said, "You've reached the offices of Bender and Blake Law. Please leave your message." Something felt off. I Googled the address. It was a UPS store. Unbelievable. Karen had created a fake law firm. At that point, it stopped being about the money or the neighborhood. It was about principle. She wanted power. She couldn't stand that someone had exposed her. So she doubled down, the way people like her always did. I decided to stop reacting and start documenting. I bought a binder, labeled it Lakeview HOA, Evidence, and filled it with every letter, screenshot, deposit record, and time-stamped note. If she wanted a legal battle, I'd give her one. 3 days later, she tried her next move. The county compliance office. Apparently, she'd filed a complaint claiming I was operating a commercial enterprise from a residential property. When the inspector came by, I greeted him with coffee and a smile. He glanced at my quiet little home office and frowned. "She said you had employees and heavy equipment," he said. "Only thing heavy here is her imagination," I replied. He laughed, looked around, and closed his clipboard. "Don't worry, Mr. Turner. Happens all the time. We'll mark this as resolved." That evening, I saw her pacing her front yard, phone glued to her ear, probably calling anyone who'd listen. When she saw me watching, she glared with the intensity of 1,000 suburban suns. I waved. The following week, she escalated again, this time mail theft. I got a call from the post office saying someone had reported me for tampering with HOA correspondence. When I explained there was no HOA, the clerk sighed. "We get her calls weekly. You're the 4th neighbor she's accused this month." I realized then she wasn't just entitled, she was obsessed. Still, I stayed calm. Karen thrived on conflict, and I wasn't about to feed her. Instead, I waited for her next mistake. It came soon enough. A month later, my neighbor Linda, the same one who'd been her vice chair, knocked on my door looking nervous. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered, "but Karen's starting it up again. She said the HOA is back under a new name, Lakeview Preservation Committee." Of course she did. I thanked Linda and went straight online. Sure enough, there it was. A new Facebook page, new logo, new fake rules. But this time, she'd made a crucial error. She'd set up an online payment system using a platform that published account information. The account owner was listed as K. Bender. So now she'd upgraded from fake HOA to fake nonprofit. I took screenshots, saved the link, and this time sent everything to the State Attorney General's Consumer Fraud Division. I figured they'd add it to a pile of small-town complaints and forget about it. But apparently the timing was perfect. A new task force had just been formed to investigate fraudulent homeowner organizations. A month later, 2 investigators showed up at my house. Real badges this time. They asked about the letters, the deposits, the fake lawyer, everything. I gave them my binder. They flipped through it like kids opening a Christmas present. "This is incredible," one said. "You basically built our case for us." They thanked me and left. I figured I might get an update in 6 months, maybe a thank you email if I was lucky. I didn't expect what happened next. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a Channel 7 news van parked outside Karen's house. Reporters were setting up cameras. A uniformed officer stood by her driveway while Karen, in full pearls and cardigan, tried to explain something with wild hand gestures. I stood at my window and sipped coffee, watching the chaos unfold. The next day, the headline hit the local news site. Local woman investigated for running fake HOA scam. Thousands collected in bogus fines. Apparently, she hadn't just targeted our neighborhood. She'd been sending HOA notices to nearby subdivisions too. Some people had paid hundreds, thinking it was legitimate. The reporter quoted a neighbor from 2 streets over. She said the board approved a new landscaping fee. We all paid it. I can't believe it was fake. That was when I realized how deep this had gone. What started as a $175 scam on me had turned into a full-blown suburban Ponzi scheme. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "You did this. I hope you're happy." I typed back, "Refund the rest, Karen." She didn't reply. A week later, I got a call from Investigator Miles, the same guy who'd taken my binder. "Just wanted to update you," he said. "We've confirmed multiple victims, and we're moving forward with charges. Wire fraud, identity impersonation, and operating an unregistered entity. You might be called as a witness." I thanked him, hung up, and looked out my window at the now dark house across the street. No porch lights. No HOA treasurer sign. Just silence. Then, a few days later, something strange happened. I checked my bank account and saw a new deposit. $1,200. The memo read, "Refunds Lakeview HOA." I called the bank. They confirmed it had been wired from the same account she'd used to cash my original check. Apparently, she was emptying the account before the state froze it. It felt poetic, really. She'd spent months trying to take money that wasn't hers, and in the end, she'd sent some of it right back to me. For a brief moment, I thought it was over. The fake HOA was gone, her social media wiped, the authorities involved. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never quit, they just changed tactics. I just didn't expect her next move to involve me directly again. This time, not as a victim, but as her supposed partner. When the email arrived, I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. The subject line read, "Urgent, Lakeview Preservation Committee Financial Inquiry." But the sender's name made me pause. lakeviewpreserveaudit@gmail.com. It sounded ridiculous enough to be Karen, yet polished enough to make me curious. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The message started formally, like it had been copied from some government template. "Dear Mr. Turner, as a former resident participant in the Lakeview Preservation Committee, your cooperation is requested in confirming payment transactions processed under your name. Failure to respond may result in joint liability." Attached was a PDF. I opened it and nearly spat out my coffee. It was a spreadsheet, neatly formatted, showing committee revenue and allocation. My name was listed as co-treasurer. For a full minute, I just stared. Then I laughed. Karen had gone from impersonating an HOA to rewriting history. Now she was trying to drag me into her fraud as her supposed partner in crime. I called the investigator, Miles, immediately. "You're not going to believe this," I said. I forwarded the email. 10 minutes later, he called back, laughing so hard he could barely talk. "She's claiming you helped her?" he said between wheezes. "Apparently," I said. "She's trying to spread the blame." "She's done," he said. "We're already pulling her banking records. But save every email. Don't respond." I didn't plan to. But Karen wasn't finished. 2 days later, a man in a gray suit showed up at my door with a clipboard. He introduced himself as a private compliance consultant. I asked for ID. He flashed a laminated card that looked like it had been printed at Staples. "I'm here to review your involvement with the Lakeview Committee," he said, glancing at my driveway like he expected evidence to fall from the sky. "Let me guess," I said. "Karen sent you." "She's my client, yes." I invited him in, poured him coffee, and handed him my binder. "Everything you need to know is in there," I said. Chronological order, including her fake checks, letters, and wire transfers. He flipped through a few pages. His face paled. He said, setting down the binder, I think that'll be all. He left without finishing his coffee. That night, Karen unleashed her masterpiece, a neighborhood-wide email blast accusing me of embezzlement. It has come to my attention, she wrote, that certain individuals, including Mr. Turner, may have misappropriated funds belonging to the Lakeview Preservation Committee. Until a full audit is complete, I advise all residents to withhold judgment. Within minutes, my phone blew up. Dude, what is she talking about? Wait, are you in trouble? Should we stop paying the committee? I responded calmly to each message. There is no committee. And if you paid anything, call your bank. Then I made my own post. Public notice. The so-called Lakeview Preservation Committee is a fraudulent entity under investigation by state authorities. Do not send payments. If you have, contact Investigator Miles at the Consumer Fraud Division. The next morning, the post had over 100 comments. Some were shocked, others angry, and a few, her die-hard loyalists, accused me of slandering a respected community leader. Karen replied to several threads herself, signing her comments, Treasurer, acting. But by noon, her tone changed from defensive to desperate. She started deleting replies, then removed the entire thread. That same day, a sheriff's deputy served her with a subpoena. Apparently, the task force had found over 40 fraudulent transactions tied to her account. It should have been the end of the story. But Karen wasn't one to bow out gracefully. She believed the only way to survive a scandal was to create a bigger one. A week later, the news broke that the Lakeview Preservation Committee had filed a small claims lawsuit against me. The claim? Unlawful retention of HOA funds. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw it. She'd actually filed paperwork, naming herself representative of the committee. The amount in question? $1,200, the same refund she'd wired to me weeks earlier. I called the courthouse to confirm. Sure enough, it was real. The clerk sounded exasperated. You wouldn't believe how many filings we get from neighborhood disputes, she said. But this one's creative. When the hearing date arrived, I wore my best suit and brought my binder. Karen showed up in a pastel blazer with a stack of papers that looked freshly printed at home. The judge, an older woman who looked like she'd seen every flavor of suburban nonsense, peered over her glasses. Ms. B., she began, you're claiming Mr. Turner owes you $1,200 in HOA funds. Can you provide proof of this HOA's existence? Karen smiled nervously. The Lakeview Preservation Committee is a community organization formed to uphold neighborhood standards. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is it registered as a legal entity? Karen hesitated. Not yet. But it's in process. And did Mr. Turner ever serve as your treasurer? She shuffled her papers. He assisted informally. I handed over my binder. Your Honor, these are bank statements, letters, and police reports proving that Ms. B. created fraudulent HOA notices and deposited checks made out to herself. The judge took one look at the first page and sighed. Ms. B., I strongly advise you to withdraw your claim before I refer this for criminal review. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then she grabbed her papers and muttered, Fine. I withdraw. Case dismissed. As we left the courtroom, she brushed past me and hissed, You won't win this forever. I smiled. Karen, I already did. For a blissful month afterward, Lakeview was peaceful. No letters, no fake committees, no pastel-colored threat. Her house went dark most evenings. Rumor had it she was selling, though no for sale sign ever appeared. Then, one Friday morning, a moving truck rolled up. I watched from my porch as workers loaded furniture, boxes, and the infamous clipboard. She didn't look my way once. I assumed it was over. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from Miles. You might want to sit down, he said. She didn't leave the area. She moved 5 miles away and started a new HOA. I laughed out loud. You're kidding. I wish I was. She registered a new group under the name Lakeview Extension Beautification Council. We're already monitoring it, but she's using different accounts and aliases. The woman's unstoppable. By then, the whole saga had become local legend. Someone on Reddit had even posted about the fake HOA lady of Lakeview, and the post went viral. Neighbors from other towns messaged me saying they'd received similar letters. Apparently, Karen had found her next territory. I thought I was free of her until one morning, when a letter appeared in my mailbox. This one wasn't threatening, it was oddly personal. Just a plain white envelope, no logos, no stamp. Inside was a handwritten note. Turner, it read, I know you think you beat me, but you never understood why I did any of this. People need order. Someone has to keep standards. Without people like me, neighborhoods fall apart. Enjoy your little victory. You'll miss me when things get messy. No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I sat there for a long time staring at it. It wasn't rage or fear I felt, it was something like pity. Karen didn't scam people for money, she scammed them for control. The money was just a way to prove her power still mattered. She couldn't stand the idea of being irrelevant. That evening, I saw a new neighbor moving into her old house, a young couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever. The husband introduced himself, cheerful and unsuspecting. We heard this was a quiet street, he said. Any HOA stuff we should know about? I grinned. Not anymore, I said. But keep your receipts just in case. He laughed, not understanding the joke. For a while, I thought that was truly the end. The Karen era of Lakeview faded into history. Then one night, as I was scrolling through community posts, I saw something that froze me mid-scroll. A listing on a local Facebook marketplace page. Official HOA letter templates and stationery, slightly used. Perfect for community organizers. $50 OBO. Pickup in Lakeview. The profile selling them? K. Blake. I clicked the name and there she was. Same photo, same smirk, new alias. Selling the tools of her chaos to the next wannabe neighborhood tyrant. I reported the listing and shut my laptop, shaking my head. Some people never learn. But I'd learned enough for both of us. I wasn't just the guy who'd been scammed. I was the one who turned her con into evidence, her power into paperwork, her fines into her downfall. And somewhere out there, Karen was probably drafting her next official notice, convinced that order could only exist if she was the one enforcing it. I didn't mind. Let her keep pretending. Because in the end, I knew the truth. She'd never cash another check without wondering whose account it might end up in next. I didn't hear about Karen again for almost a year. Life went back to normal. The lawns grew shaggy without her weekly complaints. The neighborhood barbecue actually happened without someone threatening to call the police over unauthorized outdoor cooking, and for the first time in years, people smiled at each other on Lakeview Drive. Every so often someone would mention her name like an urban legend. Remember that woman who made up her own HOA? Followed by laughter and disbelief. I always smiled politely and said nothing. I figured I'd earned the right to let the myth grow on its own. Then, one Tuesday morning in early spring, I got a letter. It wasn't from Karen directly, at least not on the surface. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize, but the handwriting on the envelope had that same tight, overconfident neatness I'd come to know. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page with a logo reading Community Standards Restoration Fund, and a message that began, Dear Mr. Turner, our organization has acquired certain records pertaining to the Lakeview Homeowners Association's prior activities. You may be entitled to restitution. It sounded legitimate until I noticed the signature. It wasn't typed, it was signed K.B. in blue ink. The initials made my stomach drop. Karen was back. I called the number on the letter. A robotic voice answered, Thank you for contacting the Community Standards Restoration Fund. Please leave your name and claim number. There was no claim number. I hung up and started laughing. I'd expected her to pop up again someday, but I hadn't expected her to return disguised as a charity. I forwarded the letter to Miles, the investigator who had handled her case before. He replied 2 hours later, "We've seen these. She's operating under a non-profit shell corporation. Don't engage. We're watching her." Apparently, she had filed paperwork for a new entity, complete with tax ID, claiming her mission was to assist neighborhoods in re-establishing proper governance after HOA dissolution. Translation: she was charging people to fix the HOA she herself had destroyed. Over the next month, I watched the signs return like weed. New flyers on mailboxes, new posts on local group. Always vague, always framed as helping communities restore order. She never used her full name anymore, just K. Bender, sometimes K. Blake. I kept my distance until one afternoon, my neighbor Marlene knocked on my door looking panicked. "Did you see this?" she said, holding up a glossy pamphlet. Across the top, in bold lettering, "Lakeview Community Revitalization Program. They're asking for volunteers," she said. "And donations. They claim it's approved by the county." I took the pamphlet and scanned the fine print. It was clever, legally phrased enough to seem real, but vague enough to avoid specifics. Then I noticed something at the bottom. Treasurer K. Blake. I sighed. "Marlene, whatever you do, don't give them a dime." But it was already too late for some. Within days, several older neighbors had mailed checks for membership dues. Others started attending planning meetings at a nearby community hall. Karen wasn't just back, she was recruiting. This time, I didn't go to the police first. I went to one of her meetings. It was surreal. The room was decorated with PowerPoint slides, banners, and snacks. Karen stood at the front, poised and radiant as ever, presenting a slideshow titled "Reclaiming Our Neighborhoods." She spoke like a motivational speaker, confident, passionate, and utterly detached from reality. "We live in a time of decay," she said dramatically. "Lawn care ignored. Driveways cracked. Mailboxes mismatched. We can't rely on the government. We must govern ourselves." People nodded. Some even clapped. I sat in the back, hood up, taking note. She claimed to have county partnerships, maintenance funds, and legal backing. Then she said something that made my jaw tighten. "I'm proud to announce that Lakeview Drive will be our pilot program. Our first restored community." That was my cue. When the meeting ended, I approached her. It took her a moment to recognize me, then her eyes widened, just slightly. "Mr. Turner," she said flatly. "I didn't realize you were still around." "Still am," I said. "And still keeping records." She smiled. "You're welcome to join. We're building something good this time. No fines, no drama. Just structure." "Structure," I repeated. "That what you call fraud now?" Her expression didn't flicker. "It's not fraud if people want it. You'd be surprised how many do." I left before I said something I'd regret. But the next morning, I emailed every contact I had in county offices, media, and the fraud division. Within 48 hours, Karen's new nonprofit was under review. That should have been enough to stop her. But Karen had learned from last time, she wasn't taking checks this round. She'd switched to digital payments, using anonymous donation links and crowdfunding pages, each one redirected through layers of shell account. She was smart, adaptive, and slippery as ever. 4 weeks, it turned into a digital tug-of-war. I'd flag her campaigns, they'd get taken down, and she'd post new ones under different names. Sometimes, Neighborhood Renewal Project. Sometimes, Citizens for Community Standards. Always the same phrasing. Always her style. Then, one day it all stopped. No new post. No flyers. No emails. Even the donation links vanished. The silence was almost suspicious. I thought maybe she'd finally been shut down, maybe arrested again. Then, about a month later, I got another call from Miles. "You're not going to like this," he said. She didn't quit. She went bigger. Apparently, Karen had taken her operation statewide. She was pitching community revitalization consulting to small towns and subdivisions with defunct HOAs. She'd registered in another county under a new alias, Karen Blake Consulting. He sighed. She's using legal loopholes now. Technically, she's just advising. No direct money handling. It's harder to prosecute. I asked how much she'd made. He said quietly, so far, over 50 grand. That number made my blood run cold. $50,000 from people who probably just wanted their neighborhoods to look nice again. For a while, I felt powerless. You can't arrest someone for being manipulative if they've found a way to make it sound legitimate. But I couldn't shake the sense that if I didn't do something, she'd keep expanding. Then I remembered something from her last scheme, the fake law firm she'd used, Bender and Blake Law. It had a fake address at a UPS store. I wondered if she'd recycled it. I drove to that same UPS store on a hunch, pretending to check my own P.O. box. I asked casually about any boxes registered under Bender, Blake, or Lakeview. The clerk, a guy in his 20s, frowned and said, "Actually, yeah. We've got a box under K. Blake Consulting. She picks up every Tuesday. Mind if I leave a letter for her?" I asked. He nodded. That night, I typed up a short, polite message. Karen, the state still has your name flagged. The next deposit you take will trigger a full audit. Consider retiring. I printed it on plain paper, sealed it, and left it in her box. A week passed. Then 2. No response, no flyers, no activity. Then Miles called again. "You'll love this," he said. "She just closed all her business licenses. Said she's moving out of state." For the first time in years, I actually exhaled. The neighborhood threw another barbecue that summer. Someone joked about framing one of her fake letters as a souvenir. People laughed. Kids played. The air felt light. And then, just as the sun set, I noticed a man setting up a table near the entrance of the park. He was handing out pamphlets titled Community Standards Consultation, local chapters forming now. The logo looked familiar, a triangle made of 3 curved lines. I froze. I walked closer. The man smiled. "Hi there, are you a homeowner? Who's running this?" I asked. He gestured to the bottom of the pamphlet. Director, K. Blake. I looked around. Across the street, in a car parked just out of sight, a woman sat in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, watching. Karen. I met her gaze for a moment. She didn't move, didn't smile, just turned her key and drove away slowly. The man at the table asked if I wanted to sign up for update. I said, "No thanks. But you might want to Google your boss." He frowned. "Why?" "You'll find out soon enough," I said, walking back toward the laughter and barbecue smoke. That night, I sent everything, photos, pamphlets, timestamps, to the State Fraud Task Force. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just tired. She wasn't a villain now. She was a pattern. A warning in human form. And even though I knew she'd pop up somewhere else, maybe in another town with another name, it didn't bother me as much as it used to. Because this time, I wasn't just the guy who caught her. I was the reason she had to keep running. 6 months passed before I heard her name again. By then, the Karen saga had become something between a neighborhood joke and a cautionary tale told to new homeowners. People said things like, "Watch out or Karen will fine you," whenever someone forgot trash day. But she'd vanished, supposedly gone to help communities in Arizona, according to one rumor. I thought that was poetic. Let the desert deal with her. Then one morning, as I was getting coffee, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Neighborhood Integrity Watch at protonmail.com. The subject line read, "Urgent. Inquiry regarding your role in Lakeview HOA legal dispute." I nearly ignored it until I saw who'd signed it at the bottom. Director, Neighborhood Integrity Watch, Karen Blake. I actually laughed out loud. She wasn't even hiding anymore. I opened the email, half out of curiosity, half disbelief. It read, Mr. Turner, as part of a continuing audit into former HOA participants, you are required to verify your financial history regarding Lakeview Community Asset. Failure to comply may result in formal complaint filings to the state. Sincerely, Karen Blake, Director. It was her old trick, dressed up with new stationery, the same self-righteous tone, the same imagined authority. I could picture her at a kitchen table somewhere, typing these messages in her cardigan and pearls, believing she was saving civilization one fake letter at a time. But this time, she'd slipped up. The email footer included a digital signature certificate, a fancy tool scammers use to make their messages seem official. What she didn't realize was that those certificates leave a metadata trail. I forwarded it to Miles, who now worked for the Federal Consumer Protection Division. 2 days later, he called me. "You have a real talent for finding her, you know that?" "I don't find her," I said. "She finds me." He chuckled. We traced the signature. She's in Nevada now. Different county, same game. She's calling herself an HOA consultant again. But here's the wild part, she's actually working for real HOAs. They think she's a compliance expert. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or swear. "You're telling me the woman who ran a fake HOA now gets paid to run real ones?" "Yep. She reinvented herself as the thing she used to pretend to be. It was so absurd it almost felt genius. Karen had found a way to legitimize her fraud by making it her career. Only Karen could commit fraud so convincingly that it turned into a resume. I asked what they planned to do. Miles sighed. "She's walking a fine line. Everything she's doing is technically legal right now. But if she starts handling payments again, we'll have grounds." I figured that would be the end of it. Let her drown in red tape somewhere else. But then came the twist I didn't see coming. She started sending letters back to my neighbors. Marlene brought me the first one. "You're not going to like this," she said, holding a cream-colored envelope that looked all too familiar. It had the logo of her Neighborhood Integrity Watch printed on the corner and was addressed to the residents of Lakeview Drive. Inside was a single-sheet warning that the integrity of Lakeview standards has been compromised by individuals spreading false information about prior HOA activities. I was mentioned by name. Twice. She'd written that I had a history of obstruction and defamation against legitimate community organizations and continued to interfere with neighborhood harmony. It was pure character assassination. I took the letter straight to the county office. The clerk read it, frowned, and said, "We can't do much about that. It's technically free speech." I left fuming. But as I drove home, I realized Karen's mistake. She'd just tied her new identity back to her old crimes. She'd reconnected the dots herself. That night, I made a few calls. I'd kept every scrap of evidence from her first fake HOA, the checks, the letters, the screenshots. I called a local journalist who had covered the story back then, a guy named Ethan. He remembered everything. "She's doing it again," he said, already sounding excited. Within a week, the headline dropped. "Fake HOA scammer now managing real neighborhoods across state lines." The article laid everything out, her aliases, her fake nonprofits, her trail of dissolved organizations. My name appeared once, described as the original whistleblower. The story exploded. Every HOA Facebook group within 100 miles was sharing it. Some were furious, some fascinated, and a few probably took note. The comments section was gold. Only Karen could scam her way into a job. Imagine paying your scammer to scam you professionally. I'd fine her for breathing. I thought that would finally end her streak. But if Karen had one superpower, it was self-preservation. 2 days after the article went viral, she issued a press statement. It was masterful spin. "Recent reports have mischaracterized my community advocacy effort. Any past administrative misunderstandings have been resolved. I remain committed to improving neighborhood integrity." She even attached photos of herself handing out flyers labeled "Clean Streets, Safe Homes." She'd turned a scandal into a publicity campaign. But she wasn't ready for what came next. Someone in her new community, probably a disgruntled homeowner, read the article and dug deeper. They found out she'd been using HOA funds to pay for consulting materials that didn't exist. When the state investigators followed up, they found the same pattern. Fake fines, fake committees, and funds routed to her consulting account. Miles called me again. She's cooked this time. Federal jurisdiction now. She moved money across state lines. It was poetic justice in slow motion. She'd reinvented herself as legitimate, only to get caught committing the same fraud, just on a bigger stage. A few weeks later, I got one last call from Ethan, the journalist. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "They arrested her yesterday. Multiple charges: wire fraud, false representation, misuse of nonprofit funds. Bail denied." I didn't celebrate. I just sat quietly for a while, remembering every ridiculous encounter, every fake fine, every smug smile. For the first time, it felt truly finished. Or so I thought. 3 months later, I got another letter. This time from the Nevada Department of Corrections. My heart skipped. Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper. "Turner," it began. "You won. Congratulations. But I still believe I was right. People need structure, and no one else would do it. The world doesn't work without rules. Remember that." No apology, no remorse. Just that same self-justifying righteousness that had driven her all along. I folded the letter and put it in the binder, right between the first fake fine and the refund check. The full circle. But the story didn't end there, not quite. A month after her conviction, a local documentary team reached out. They were doing a piece on small-town frauds and the psychology of control. They wanted to interview me. I agreed, mostly to make sure her side of the story didn't rewrite history. During the interview, the producer asked, "Why do you think she did it? Money? Power?" I thought for a long time before answering. Karen didn't crave money. She craved authority. In her mind, rules made her matter. Without them, she was just another neighbor. The documentary aired online and, to my surprise, went viral. People loved it, not just for the absurdity, but because everyone knew a Karen like her. Someone who craved control so badly they'd burn everything down to get it. Afterward, I started getting emails from strangers all over the country. "We had someone just like her in our neighborhood. Can you share how you handled it? What's the best way to stop fake HOAs?" It was surreal. I'd gone from victim to unintentional expert on suburban fraud. I even got invited to speak at a local homeowner conference about recognizing signs of community scams. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had spent years trying to crown herself the queen of HOA law, and now I was the one teaching others how to spot people like her. At the end of my talk, someone asked, "Do you think she'll ever change?" I smiled. "Karen doesn't change. She rebrands." The audience laughed, but I didn't mean it as a joke. I'd learned something about people like her. They never truly stop. They just wait for a new stage. That night, after the conference, I checked my email out of habit. Among the usual spam was one short, anonymous message. No name, no subject. Just 3 words. "Enjoy your peace." No one else would have signed it that way. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if it meant surrender, or a warning. Either way, I decided to take it literally. I closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and stepped outside. The street was quiet. No HOA flyers, no threats, no drama. Just the sound of crickets and sprinklers. For the first time in years, Lakeview felt exactly as it should, free. When the news of Karen's sentencing finally hit, it felt strangely anticlimactic. 2 years in federal custody for mail and wire fraud, with a lifetime ban on managing or representing any homeowners association or nonprofit. That was it. After all the chaos, the years of letters, fines, and fake organizations, she was officially done, on paper, at least. But anyone who'd ever dealt with Karen knew that done wasn't really in her vocabulary. Still, life on Lakeview Drive felt different. Quieter. The tension that used to hum beneath every conversation was gone. Neighbors who had once eyed each other with suspicion now laughed about how they'd survived the HOA wars. We even had a running joke at the annual barbecue. Someone would tape a sign to the cooler that said, "Approved beverage temperature, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, per Karen." It got a laugh every time. I moved on, or at least tried to. My binder of evidence sat in the back of a filing cabinet, collecting dust. I figured one day I'd toss it in the fireplace, a symbolic end to the saga. I stopped checking for letters, stopped watching the news for her name. It was over. Until, one afternoon, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman named Lila, an investigator from a victims' restitution fund. She said, "Mr. Turner, as part of Ms. B.'s plea agreement, restitution checks are being distributed to affected parties. You're listed among them." I didn't expect that. She explained that the court had seized the remaining funds from Karen's fraudulent accounts, about $20,000 total, to be divided among the victims. My portion came to $1,375. It wasn't the money that caught my attention, it was the fact that her name was still moving through official channels. Even behind bars, she was leaving paperwork in her wake. I signed the documents, received the check, and tucked it into my binder. Closure, I thought. For real this time. But closure is a tricky thing. A few weeks later, I got another call. This time from Ethan, the journalist who'd covered her story from the start. "You'll never guess who reached out to me," he said, excitement in his voice. "Karen." I froze. "From prison?" "Yep. She sent me a letter asking for an interview. Says she's writing a memoir, Restoring Order, my journey through the HOA crisis." I groaned. "You've got to be kidding me." "She says it's about redemption," Ethan said. "Claims she wants to educate communities on avoiding administrative chaos." That sounded exactly like her, turning accountability into a platform. I told Ethan he could do what he wanted, but he'd better be ready for manipulation. He ended up visiting her. When he called me afterward, his voice was equal parts amused and unsettled. "She's unbelievable," he said. "She still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She told me, I didn't steal, I organized." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was chilling in that quietly dangerous way only someone like Karen could be. A few months later, the article came out. It was titled, "The HOA Queen of Suburbia, Inside the Mind of America's Most Notorious Neighborhood Scammer." It went viral instantly. Karen had turned herself into a legend again, an antihero for people who secretly loved to hate her. The piece included quotes from her interviews, one of which stuck with me. "People vilify me because I took initiative. The world needs structure, even if it resents those who impose it." It made my skin crawl. Then came the emails. Not from her, at least not directly, but from strangers. "Hey, are you the guy who took down the HOA scammer? Would you ever write a book about it? My neighborhood's dealing with someone similar, can you help?" Apparently, Karen's notoriety had sparked a small movement. Communities all over the country started re-examining their own HOAs, digging into finances, discovering their own mini-Karens. Ethan called it the Lakeview effect. At first, I thought it was funny. Then the requests started piling up. Local news interviews, podcasts, even a few TV producers sniffing around for documentary rights. I turned them all down. I'd spent years living inside Karen's chaos. I didn't want to turn it into content. But then one request came that I couldn't ignore. It was from a small-town mayor in Nevada. He wrote, "We recently discovered our HOA treasurer embezzling funds. She claimed to be working with a consultant named K. Blake. Any chance that's connected to your case?" My stomach dropped. I called Miles. He was still with the fraud division, now working in a supervisory role. I read him the email. He groaned audibly. "We checked after her sentencing. She's not supposed to have contact with any HOA or consulting group. But some people work around that. Letters, aliases, relative. We'll look into it. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Maybe K. Blake was just a copycat using her name. But something in my gut told me otherwise. 2 weeks later, Miles confirmed it. It's her, he said grimly. She's not out, but she's communicating through someone else, a woman named Trish Blake. Her cousin. She's running a consulting company out of Reno, but Karen's fingerprints are all over the documents. Same writing style, same phrases. It's like she's ghost managing from the inside. He paused. You've seen how she works. If she's back at it, we're going to need every piece of evidence you've got. So I dusted off the binder. The one I'd promised myself I'd never open again. I spent hours scanning letters, highlighting patterns, attaching metadata. I even included her prison correspondence, the one that ended with "people need structure." It was eerie how easily I slipped back into the rhythm of documenting her schemes, like reopening an old wound that hadn't fully healed. 2 months later, I got the call. We got her. Apparently, Karen had been using her cousin to funnel instructions from prison, writing consulting notes that were actually business directive. She'd even managed to authorize payments from the company's bank account through her cousin's signature. The authorities charged them both. It was the last con in her endless chain of control, and it finally collapsed under its own weight. I didn't celebrate. I just went for a long walk around Lakeview, past the mailbox where her first fake fine had arrived years ago. The paint was chipped now, the post leaning slightly. I thought about how much energy one person could waste chasing control, and how much damage it left behind. A few weeks later, I got one final letter. It came through official channels again, this time marked Approved Correspondence, Nevada State Correctional Facility. It was short. Turner, you were right. The system I built fell apart because no one wanted to maintain it. But you should know, they're asking me for advice now. The administrators. The real ones. Maybe I'll finally do it the right way. K. I didn't know whether to laugh or sigh. Even in prison, she was consulting. I folded the letter and placed it in the binder's last sleeve. I realized the binder wasn't just evidence anymore, it was a record of human obsession. A story of what happens when someone confuses control with purpose. A year later, I finally did burn it. Not out of anger, out of release. I tossed it into a metal fire pit one quiet evening. The papers curled, blackened, and turned to ash. The flames glowed orange against the night, flickering like the end of a long, ridiculous chapter. As I watched the smoke rise, I couldn't help thinking about her words. People need structure. Maybe she was right in some strange, twisted way. But it wasn't her kind of structure that kept communities alive. It was empathy, cooperation, and the ability to laugh at yourself. Lakeview had learned that the hard way. Months later, I hosted a neighborhood gathering at my place. We grilled, we laughed, we toasted to peaceful anarchy. Someone even made shirts that said, "No HOA, no problem." As the night wound down, one of the new neighbors, a young guy who'd just moved in, asked me, "Hey, what's the deal with this Karen person everyone jokes about?" I smiled. "Long story," I said. "Let's just say she tried to fine us for existing." He laughed. "Sounds like a legend." "She was," I said. "And hopefully that's all she'll ever be." When the crowd left and the streetlights hummed softly in the dark, I stood at the edge of my driveway and listened. No barking dogs, no sirens, no fake inspectors. Just the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. For the first time, it didn't feel like the calm before another storm. It felt like peace that had finally earned its place. Somewhere out there, Karen was probably still writing letters, maybe teaching workshops to bored inmates on administrative organization. And maybe, in her own way, she believed she'd built something lasting. But I knew better. She hadn't built an organization. She'd built a warning. And every time I saw a new neighbor smiling over their fence, free from the shadow of her imaginary authority, I knew her lesson had stuck, louder and longer than any fine she'd ever written. because in the end, the neighborhood didn't need rules to survive. It just needed freedom from the people who thought they should be in charge. And that, I realized, was the one HOA Karen could never control.